and the journeys that we have taken over the years. So, are you ready to have this discussion?
Yes, I am.
I'm thrilled. So, I'm very happy we're doing this, and I'm so curious. So, all of these journeys start someplace. Sometimes it's back in early childhood, sometimes it's a little later. Um, but I am curious, for you, on your journey of becoming this incredible storyteller and doing the work that you do with companies and with leaders and with policymakers and governments, where do you think it all started for you?
I think my journey into storytelling really started, I would say, really with my birth, because from my point of view right now, I wouldn't say it's just one happening or one situation that really motivated me or gave birth to my passion or my calling to storytelling. But frankly, it's like when I look back in my through my life, and I'm now 55 years old. It's really like there's a lot of milestones, events that really brought or created this kind of empathetic, storytelling, addicted person. And when I prepared our talk and our conversation, I created a mind map. And while going through all these steps of my life and all the branches of my personal tree, my biographical tree, I always thought, wow, every step, even it was a difficult experience, it was a helpful experience to get to see more, like facets of a diamond. You start with one thing and then another thing. And you see my nose. I have a broken nose, for example. When I broke my nose in the age of around 5 years, I fell down the slide in the kindergarten. I broke it. I went home, I cried. It was hard because my nose was broken. It was blowing up. And from this point on, my nose started to grow, not straight, but, I would say nonlinear. And so I became a joke for a lot of children my age. They start to tease me. So I tried to become invisible. Wherever I was, they say, oh, look, the guy with the broken nose. Oh, funny, he has a broken nose. Because I was not regular. And I think without this situation, I wouldn't be as empathetic as I am. So, for example, if I see a refugee, a person who has disadvantages, or is an outsider or a maverick, I always feel like I am the one. I can understand him. So I was on the side. I was mobbed. I was, put outside of the group. But it's very important because this is the reason why I understand Charlie Chaplin, because Charlie Chaplin always played the roles of somebody who is outside of the community, out of the group. On the other hand, he played this in a gentleman style with a high status, with a black, black robe, with a gentleman style. But he was an outsider. And I think all storytelling deals or tells stories about outsiders, more or less. Jesus was a kind of an outsider as well. So having felt this in my early childhood made me sensible. And this is just one of 20, 30, or 50 different experiences that made me. And therefore, I am able to do what I'm doing, because you mentioned that I'm working for government, I'm working for companies, I'm working for media, of course, but it makes me this sensitive person. So I think it's really bring the dots together, like Steve Jobs said in the commencement speech at Stanford. You have to connect the dots, bring all the things together. So I would say it's really the childhood. Yeah.
Right. And there were, I think, two things that in your childhood that struck me as really intriguing, that sort of led you into this path of storytelling. And one is a book, and then the other one was photography and photos. So talk to me a little bit about both of those, because when some people come to storytelling by being exposed to a relative is a great storyteller. But it sounds like your entry was through books and photography. So what was happening there?
Well, the interesting thing is, last year I had an appointment with Randy Nelson. He was the former dean of the Pixar University, and he's now retired. And we had a discussion going on in his office at Apple because he became the director of the Apple University. And he said, Uwe, how do we learn? Do we learn more from agreement or disagreement? And I said, frankly, it's probably agreement. He said, no, it's disagreement. I said, but it's agreement, because I think if you feel like an outsider and you don't feel recognized, not heard, not seen, the first step you need to have to learn is, from my point of view, is to be understood or seen. If you feel understood, you can go a step beyond. And then you grow by disagreement. You know, Randy gave me such an inspirational conversation with him. And I'm 100% sure that it's right with the disagreement. For example, if I say the world is like this and somebody says, no, it's different, you start to see a gap and it starts to change you. So for example, the book you mentioned, My Childhood, was a book, it's called, it's a book, The Gifted, Das Drama des begabten Kindes, the drama of the gifted young child. It's written by Alice Miller, a Jewish psychotherapist. And at this age, I felt so wrong and such an outsider. And I felt mental ill, and I feel I didn't look pretty, and so on. And in this book, I recognized I'm a kind of an outsider, like the people are described in this book. In this book, for example, she describes Adolf Hitler. And she describes him as a very talented person, but through trauma and different experience became absolutely criminal. But it's not only that you described him. There are so many descriptions of people. And for me, it was like, wow, I'm not alone anymore. There's a great Jewish psychotherapist who really can explain this phenomena. And from this moment on, I never felt alone anymore, because I understood, probably if you think you're strange, probably you're talented. So it's probably what you feel like in a low status could be a being high skilled on the other hand. So this was the one you mentioned. The other thing is that when I started taking photographs and to develop them on my own lab, I started to recognize that I have a different view. It's not only the regular normal view of like a tree or a landscape or something. No, I started to really to find my view into the world. And this is the reason why I always think like storytelling is about finding your voice or your way how to see the world. And it's absolutely okay to see it differently. And this is what, like in 100 years ago, somebody would have done writing poems. I didn't write poems. I did photography. And I got a kind of, I was quite successful because companies asked me to make some photos for them. And I had the opportunity or the permission to make an exhibition in a coffee with my photos about construction sites. Wow. And you could say, construction site, this is not beautiful. No, it's something of emergence. And I found out that the things that are already exist, you can't change them. It's a bit like in the Christian religion, you say the Trinity, you say it's Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? But Father means that's the old world you're born into, and you as a son has to find your own voice. And so for me, creating own photographs was very important to find that I'm different and that I recognize my style and that people recognize how I am. But unfortunately, when I shot a photo of a beautiful woman, for example, people would say, what a beautiful photo. And so I thought, well, I want to make a great photo. And you equate photo and beautiful girl as the same. So I thought, wow, that's a difficult job. Because at that time I thought my biggest dream as a person would be to become a free photographer. I don't know if you know the Bridges of Madison County. It's a story about a photographer from National Geographic. And this was my dream, having a Nikon camera, a Leica, traveling through the world, shooting people, shooting landscape, and
Yeah.
really conserving
Yeah.
or bring the spirit to the world. So this was my dream, but I feared and scared that could I make money with it? Could I survive by just making photographs, postcards, or books or exhibitions? I thought, no, it's impossible. And I thought this was one of my biggest problems as a child, that people say you can't earn money with writing, you can't earn money with making photos. And I had I had a voluntary time at a photographer, and he was shooting photographs. He said it's a very hard job, and so I didn't have somebody who said, "Wow, it's working. Follow me. I'm an icon for you." No, he said, "Don't do it. It's very difficult, and you won't like the people." And I grew up in Swabia. Swabia, that's kind of, I don't want to say that's are very romantic people, great inventors, but on the other hand, because of their modesty, because of their poverty through centuries, they're kind of narrow-minded. On the other hand, they're emotionally or romantically open-minded, but financially they're sometimes very narrow-minded. So I grew up in a world where they don't give you trust or say, just start it, you will find a solution. No, they would say, never do this. It was hard, and I found it out later. So there was a long answer to an inspiring question. Thank you very much for these questions.
Oh, my pleasure. But I love what you said, the photography really allowed you to develop your own point of view and gave you an understanding of what that point of view is. And I think it's really pivotal when you said, oh, wait, you took a picture of this beautiful woman and people could not distinguish between the craft of photography and the beautiful woman. They saw that as the same, but of course it's not, because every photographer is going to approach that beautiful woman differently. And so there was no appreciation for you as a photographer, but only for the image of the woman. And yeah, that would be confusing. That would be confusing.
Yeah.
But I thought, what a great lesson also.
Yeah, and it means that if you have a very expensive model, you are a great photographer. But if you,
right,
it means it puts the value to the model, what is in front of the camera, and not to your point of view. And I thought that brought me to going into movie business, because the hundredths of a second, if it's not worth considering the context and going deep into the photo and staying there for 10 minutes and have creations, or have, let's say, own connections or own resonance into the photo. I thought, okay, I have to tell the story longer than a hundredth of a second. I have to tell the story 90 minutes. So this was the reason going into more storytelling, because I wanted to create transformative things, because I suffered as a child, because I was lonesome, because I broke my nose, my grandparents lost their homeland. So I had, I did a civil service, instead of going to the military service, and so I did a social service, and there I had to look after Jewish people who were in the concentration camp, and I found out that there are so many things went wrong in the world. We have to tell about it, and so it was important to find a voice or a channel to bring this out. Yeah.
Right. And I think there was because of your early childhood experiences and what they went through, there were probably some connections, some common understandings that you had both come to. That group of people that you were assisting and understanding of yourself, right? But what an amazing experience to have in terms of hearing different kinds of stories, right, from people. And I bet I'm sure it gave you a much richer perspective on life, right? Which I'm sure probably impacted you and your film work, later. So.
Yeah, it was shocking. Yeah, because, for example, when I had this experience with these people, the people who survived concentration camp, that was for me, it was a big trauma afterwards. I didn't recognize that at that moment. I totally empathize with them. And I was probably the last person they met in their life to testimony or to hear their stories, what they went through. For example, there was a woman, an old woman from Poland, from Warsaw, from the Warsaw Kosk, from the main street of Warsaw. She was an entrepreneur, and she was captured with her family, came to Auschwitz. Her husband and her husband and her children were killed, and through all her life, she couldn't never, get through that. Of course not. But now when I met her, she was 80, and she thought she was kind of stuck in this trauma. And she were probably 32 or 33 when she was in the concentration camp. And she tried to make me, she wanted to sleep with me. She wanted to make me to sleep with her and make children. And she asked me, why don't you want to make love with me? I said, well, I think you're very attractive and I really love you. But it was difficult. Of course, she was kind of weird. She had let's say, a mental problem. But it wasn't not only a mental problem. It was like the hurt, the trauma still existed. And my soul was crying, and I was shouting out, and I didn't know how to tell the story. So I started to write the book afterwards, because a friend of mine, a professor for sociology, he said, Uwe, if you don't write that down, it will keep you traumatized. You have to write down all the stories to give birth to them and to get rid of them. So there are so many facets of storytelling. And still today, I would like to publish this book. But at that time, some people said, you have to publish it. Some said, it is so scandalous because what you're telling, nobody wants to hear that in Germany, because you tell stories of people who were in concentration camp, and you tell them as humans and what they suffered and what they went through, and even silly or crazy things. You tell all that, and you can't do that. So I feared, because they said, if you do that, your whole life will be destroyed. So if you can't start in your life and knowing that your whole life will be destroyed. So I was probably a millimeter, or some centimeters or, inches far away from, being an author or telling my stories. No, I stopped it. So again, I was stuck in myself. So being stuck or finding my voice. So storytelling is not only, we're all born with a voice. That doesn't mean that we tell stories. So if, for example, your father is very, very harsh to you, and he shouts to you, you don't learn probably to tell your story, because you don't feel yourself in a safe surrounding. So all people in the world tell stories. They could theoretically, but they don't do it. So I want to help them to tell the stories.
Right. And you mentioned a key word there, which is safety, right? And you mentioned something else earlier too that I think is really important, so that people feel seen, and then heard, and then valued, right? All three of those pieces. And storytelling, as you and I both know, can be an amazing experience and a transformative experience for people for those four reasons: safety, being heard, being seen, and being valued. But life went on tell me.
Yeah. I just want to mention that when I read your book, the book, the dummy book, and you mentioned in the book that 80% of storytelling is story listening, it was again a milestone in my life. For the first time, I thought, there is a friend of mine. She's called Karen Dietz, and she speaks out loud what I always felt inside of myself. But having it inside of yourself doesn't mean that you can recognize it. In Hinduism, in Hinduistic religion, you say there's Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat means being, and Chit means to have it in your conscious. And the third is Ananda, means to have fun, bliss. You're in your bliss. So in the moment you mentioned that is a story, listening is 80%. It was a movement from being to consciousness. Oh yes, she said it. Right, I felt it all the time, but she helped me building a bridge, a neuron, the fire of, fire to the next neuron. And it was a party. It was like a holy marriage in my brain. So I was so happy.
Oh, I love it.
This is the person I want to get in touch with. And I want to pray this book because this is for, there are thousands of great ideas in the book, but this one was, in that point, it was very important for me, dominant in my life, because it was important to know, yes, since then I can go to all my clients and customers and media and business and say, listen, story listening is so important. It's 80%. Look, Karen Dietz, said it. And I agree. And you will find it out how important it is. And I will tell it to Randy Nelson again, because we're still in discussion about agreement and disagreement. And from my point of view, agreement is first act. Second act is disagreement. And the solution is the third, or, the comprehension or the epiphany. That means it's the third act. So it's, for me, a process.
Yeah, and that's what's happened in our conversations between us, right? Because there have been times when we've been sharing different ideas and thoughts, and it's kind of like, really? And yet we have a discussion about it, and we come to an agreement around it. And so the result of all of that is greater understanding, greater wisdom, greater comprehension about the world around us, and what's not to love about that?
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
But your journey didn't stop there with this, crossroads of, do I write these stories down and publish them, or do I not, right? Something happened for you after that can move you on your journey of storytelling even further. So what did happen?
Very exciting thing was then that I studied filmmaking at the film school in Munich, and it's one of the most famous film schools in the world. And I was taken as one of 12. Some thousand people applied for the study, and I was one of 12 who got a seat, a place to study there. So I was very proud. So I wanted to bring my heart and my knowledge and my stories onto the table, but the situation there wasn't only supportive, or not for my personality. I couldn't fight through with my ideas. They said, oh no, forget your story. Storytelling is like a muscle. You can train it, you can tell every story. I said, I don't want to tell every story. I wanted to tell certain stories. So that was a kind of a trauma again. And then I was asked by a German Academy Award winner called Volker Schloendorff. He won the Oscar, the Academy Award for Tin Drums. And he asked me to join him and his team when he started to become the managing director of the film studio in Babelsberg. Film studio in Babelsberg, the UFA studio, is the oldest film studio in the world. Imagine, in the studio is based in the DDR, in the German Democratic Republic. And it was, the wall came down, the oldest studio in the world, was the main studio of the GDR. And then the wall came down and they had to take over. Some people had to find a solution how to bring this oldest studio in the world into the future. And it was in a German democratic nation. So he asked me, will you join me? And we had there 2,000 people working there, still doing communist movies. And I was asked with him, work there. And, and now we have the opportunity to make the best movies of all times, but we didn't have scripts. We had 10 empty sound stages. We didn't have a script. We didn't have the money. So how do you find stories to tell? So all the scripts, they came in every day. You had a lot of scripts came in from authors and writers from all over the world, in English and French and in Russian and all the language and in German. But reading, in 2 years, I read 2,000 scripts. But from 2,000 scripts, I had the feeling like just 2 or 3 were, from my point of view, valuable enough to make them into a real movie, because movie means an investment of some $1 million or $30 million. And you have to make money with that, because I have to pay the salaries of the people. I can just make, and I understand all the authors came to me and said, don't you like my book? I said, I like your book, but it's not mature. It's nice, but it's not really onto the point. And it's your trauma and it's your story, but it probably doesn't help to upload or to load up load the batteries of the soul of the people who go into the cinema. So it was a kind of trauma again, because I saw all the people working, looking for work, looking for money, looking, and on the other hand, there were sad authors, script writers. So they wanted to have a job. They wanted to write a lot. And I didn't get, and I was the right hand of the studio boss, of Volker Schloendorff. So I had a quite important job as I was in the mid of my 20s. Yeah. But I did not know, I didn't have the skills to create great screenplays that could change the world, that could really be seen or asked, that they are asked to be seen. So that was a very shocking situation, because having 10 empty studios, 10 empty sound stages, having so many actors and all this, but you don't have the scripts to shoot. So now since then, I'm working on how to tell stories. For example, I went to Stanford. In Stanford, there are the design thinkers. And I thought, how can we create stories, building writers' rooms, bringing authors together and create great script? That's possible. But you have to look at the people, the viewers. How do they see love? How do they see politics and so on? For example, if you imagine It's a Wonderful Life by Frank Capra, of movies of the 40s. People need stories. They need the stories to transform, to become human, and we didn't deliver the right stories for them. So this is the reason another trauma happened in my life concerning stories. So all of the events, all the milestones in my life had something to do with storytelling. Doesn't mean it means something with for example, the Holocaust, or something to do with movie making, or with being an outsider, psychological topics. So many things coming together. For me, therefore, storytelling is a universe.
Right. Well, you know a few things that you said really strike me. And one is that here you were on all these empty sound stages, and you were getting all these scripts, but of the 2,000 that you read, only 3 were actually the kind of script that was transformative, right? For a lot of people, could be a lot of people. But in that experience, it was like you were learning from the blank space, from the negative space, right? The negative. Exactly. In art, we talk about positive and negative, not in terms of what's good and bad, but there's the positive image, and then there's the negative, right? Or in film, the negatives, right? That are the one side of the image, right? There's the positive, the one that you print, and then there's the negative. But learning from that negative space, right, could be very, very powerful. And it seems like that was part of what you were going through, which is a really interesting and different way to learn from that negative space. And so that strikes me. And then what also strikes me is, well, once again, you're being told, no, you can't do that, right? But it led you on to this other quest of, okay, well, how do you tell a great story? Oh, and the other point that you made, so fundamental to storytelling, and most people don't recognize this, is that the first, for me, the first rule of storytelling is know your audience.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And the second is speak to your audience. And it seems like you were having this experience repeatedly of people not knowing their audience. And so because of that, the stories were, not going to work so well.
Absolutely. It's kind of produced into a vacuum,
Yes, vacuum.
Vacuum, yeah. It's exactly what you mean. It's normally there's somebody who is sending a story, and the other one is the recipient. There's a communication, a bridge, a floating from back and forth. But I thought like we did movies, but nobody wanted to watch it, and we didn't went to the people and asked them, How do you live? What do you suffer? What are you dreaming of? Because when films are successful, they hit something, they strike something that is important. And it's not so difficult to get in touch. But in Germany, we have a lot of the idea of the genius. Yeah, filmmaking is about genius. I try something, in most cases, it doesn't work. But why don't we start making movie by really having an idea probably, but going into iterative process of back and forth talking and listening. And this is what you could do by applying design thinking technique into script development. For example, I'm consulting actually at the moment the biggest crime series on TV in Germany. And what I did is that I started to talk with a relative of mine. He was the head of the investigation department, at the police. And I asked him for a couple of hours, how do you work? What do you think about criminals? What is your technique of finding out who's the murderer, and so on and so on. Then I asked people, why are they watching the crime series, and so on. And I found out crime series is about justice and injustice. Because if you are a superficial person, you won't watch crime series, because crimes is about what is good and what is bad and what is allowed and what is not allowed. And since the Egyptian Totengericht, when you die, you come into a space where you are checked if you go to hell or to heaven.
Right.
And that's a very old idea that came into Christianity and so on. So it's people say, you didn't give me enough. I give you, let's say, I give you a bread and you didn't give me the equal money for that. People are very sensitive to if it's it's justified or not. And so for me, writing or creating television. So in this case, I'm training the directors, I'm training the authors, the script writers. But what I'm doing, I help growing and developing the authors as personality, seeing the world in a 360 degree, looking at your own feeling of injustice, your own hero's journey, your own growth, but also looking at the people who do mistakes or who become criminals. They weren't criminal at birth, from their birth on, but they started to become in this direction. So and what happened is they're very successful. They're more successful than they were before because of my support, because I help them really better tell the story. But what I'm doing, I'm really going beyond just saying I'm sending a story. No, we try to create stories that really touches the people, where we try to understand which stories are through, for example, the Corona crisis or the COVID-19 crisis. We try to put all these stories inside of the plot, so that people feel like the story is 100% good for me. It's the story I need to transform. Because it's a catalyst for transformation stories. So I can create the perfect story for every person. And if I want to reach millions of people, I can create it. And then we have Netflix. They produce a lot of stories. The artificial intelligence that they apply, they find out that people love crime series, or a lot of crimes are produced more than they needed, because what we need is stories that really help us grow, help us to transform, help us to transcend.
Right.
A lot of stories are just entertainment. But for me, there is no difference between entertainment and really helping you to grow.
Right. Yeah, I call some of those entertainment stories, well, it's like, having a snack of potato chips, right? Very enjoyable, right? Not really contributing to my soul, right? Not really helping me improve the health of my body, mind, spirit, or whatever. But perfectly enjoyable. I love potato chips. They're great as a snack. But as a steady diet, what happens? If you have a steady diet of that, then your soul, your body, your spirit starts collapsing. Even though you're having a good time. So, I kind of like to make the distinction between junk food stories and soul food stories. And not that junk food is bad, because I believe I like my own little,
Getaways,
experiences of,
experiences, yeah. The joy
I
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Right, right. So you're speaking to that, but the other thing that I love that you're saying, two things that I think are really, really important that I think make your work so much different than others. And that is, well, in America, we have, in our film industry, we have a lot of storytelling by formula. So that means, the studio executives has figured out what makes money. So we'll just keep replicating that formula because we know it makes money. And, we change the characters, change the context, change the scene, but it's the same old, right? So that's one thing that you are, not doing so much, right? So there's a difference there. And then the other thing that you're doing that I absolutely love is that what we know is that all great stories are based in great character development. And there are the two approaches, maybe more than two approaches, but in my mind, I see these two approaches to storytelling, at least in the film side of the industry, and that is plot, right? Oh, I need to have a good plot. The story is plot driven. I construct the story from plot, right? Or the other way is
Action driven or character driven.
Character, and then character driven, right? Yeah, and that's the other way. And I find myself, and maybe I'm just jaded after all these years of being in storytelling, but I'd be curious to see, understand your perspective too, is that if it's plot driven, I can write it, right? I can predict exactly what's going to happen when I'm watching something, right? But if it's character driven, oh, now that grabs my attention. That's when I become really fascinated and lose myself in the story. So, and I understand that there's a mix between the two that is also very successful, right? But I was really struck by those comments you were making and how that is so important to you in your work, it seems.
Absolutely, fascinating. And I have several ideas that come into my mind by looking at the character idea. I think character is primary. Character is first. If you have a great character, you want to watch it. And for example, in TV shows, you will follow so many episodes if you like the character. Doesn't matter if the episode is one time better or less. The exciting thing is, do I have a resonance to this person? And I think the best stories we have are based upon true characters, not homo fictus, but homo realitas, real characters. So even James Bond is based upon a true character. The character who invented the TV show, the books, and gave the birth to the film project. I think in most cases, people won't tell it, but you have to learn how characters are, and you have to get in touch with them. You have to listen to them. I met it one day, 25 years ago, I met a guy, a very successful screenwriter in Germany, and he said, Uwe, my secret is that when I started my career, I was a psychology student, and I made interviews with 500 different characters. And what I did, I made the interviews, I recorded them, and then I transcribed them. And when I transcribed them, I knew how they worked. I knew their language because I wrote down every word. So from then on, I could create every series, doesn't matter if it's a hospital series, TV show, whatever, because I knew them by heart. And for example, if I haven't met a murderer, I haven't talked to him, well, how do I create a great character? And for example, Breaking Bad is based upon a true story. You couldn't invent this character. There are
Right.
people who lost their for, lost their homes, lost their jobs, who received cancer. And what do you do in a situation where you lose your job, you don't earn money as a teacher? How do you cope with that? So you have to find a solution. It's not impossible to start to making a career as a drug lord. But in this case, there are real elements. So, for example, in the emergency room, one of the biggest TV shows written in America, it's based to 90% of real stories, real plots, but also real characters. So from my point of view, if you want to be a great writer, you have to have passion for people and listen to them, record them, transcribe them. And if you know them, understand, from then on, you can create fictional plots or great plots. But again, it's based upon the idea that you mentioned and you brought into the world, the story listening. So character is the most interesting thing in the world, characters. And we started to make a book for a private bank. And normally banks, when they do books about their work or for the distribution or the sales, what they do is they use stock photos and other things, stock photos, and the invention of, they tell their stories with a company speech, with a corporate speech.
Right.
In this case, I said, no, let's find from thousands of customers you have, let's find some and interview them, transcribe them, and let them tell the words. And also listen to your own employees. And we all write them down and transcribe them. And then we build the book as a customer journey, like the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And the CEO said, well, that's an idea. That's an idea. It would be different for all the banks. Yeah. It's about characters. And it's for the first time in their history, it's written by the people by themselves, by their words, by their personal storytelling, not the corporate storytelling, not we are the best bank in the world and we do that and that. Yeah. That's cliche and that's cold. And especially in the COVID crisis, people don't accept them anymore. They feel like they are more sensitive than ever. They want to hear authentic words, authentic language. From my point,
that's exactly
around
true. Yeah, that's so true. So what are some of the results? What's been happening because of that work that you did in the bank? How are things shifted or changed?
It's a kind of a shift, from selling our product to the people to really going into creating products that really suit their needs, really going into a conversation. The CEO of this company is a very open-minded person, very interested in people. He wants to make people rich, every person rich. So he wants really to understand and help them grow, like in a hero's journey, because he sees everybody's on a journey in your life, everybody, and every company as well. So we're building the book with the theory of the hero's journey that is based upon the 3-act structure of Aristotle, the beginning, middle, and the end, because that's the universal structure of everything that happens in the evolution. You are born, that's the first act, you have a life, second act, third act, you have to say goodbye one day. So in between, every project, every event in your life is based upon the same trilogy of 3 acts. And that is also shown in the Christopher Vogler's world of the hero's journey, or Campbell's recognition that there are patterns. And as you mentioned before, you can use them as a cold formula, or you can say it's only about the quest. From my point of view, it's much more about every person's life, about the life of every individual, about every plant, about every animal. We all have a living and we all try to survive. Even a plant tries that. They put their head against the sun, even plants. They're looking for the sun. They're looking for water. So they're building roots. So we all try to find a living.
Right. It's interesting because my business storytelling colleagues and I here in the US have been having a few conversations lately together about maybe upgrades to the hero's journey that we need today because of what's happening with the coronavirus and our experiences these days. And sort of one of the upgrades we're thinking about is, it seems like maybe what's been a little lost in the hero's journey in the past is the notion of community and the collective, and going through things together, right? And but sometimes it's a community of heroes instead of just one single hero. Or how do our individual journeys bring us together in a collective experience? And then how do we tell that story? And so I don't know where all this is going, but these are, fascinating conversations that I think are quite relevant today. And your experience with the bank seems to me that it touches on that collective a little bit more, because it's not the corporate bank speak, right? It is going down into the organization and with the customers, and having the collective voices of both the, all of those people, right, share their stories. Because it's not just one. I mean, you could tell this ad infinitum, right? You have such a richness of stories, from staff and from customers. And then in my mind, I don't know what you think about this, but that creates a collective story, right? The collective story of the bank. And it's still, a hero's journey, but it's tweaked a little. It's a little different, right? What do you think about all of that?
Oh, it's wonderful what you mentioned. I think really when you bring people into storytelling, let's say all the customers or employees, it's not only top-down storytelling, an anonymous, indefinite character, corporate storyteller that tells the story. No, it's the story woven together with different people, like an orchestra, finding an own songs, creating an own opera. That's totally different. And from my point of view, a story is, from the neural point of view, it's like a mega molecule. It's a molecule, like a huge molecule of neurons coming together. And everyone asks him, is a make sense mandate of the company. It's a mind share of thousands of people creating a story together. Means they create a neural mega molecule that is a story. It's a make sense mandate for everybody, but it's not only top down. It's not only bottom up. It's lateral, from left to right, from one to another, but also from the boss to the people, but also from the people to the boss. So it's really, but it's a network of mind, a network of neurons, like a neural network. It's a story network, a neural story network. It's for me, it's as a picture and image, it would be like a huge mega molecule, a molecule of a story, because if you don't have it, you're floating. You don't know where to go, what you think. I don't want to work there anymore, or it makes sense. It's a make sense mandate. Why are we here? How do we do it? What are we doing it? And or to which purpose are we here? For what purpose are we here? So,
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love all that you said. In fact, I was taking some notes on it. I was so struck by what you said. So thank you, Uwe. It's really, really powerful, really powerful. So, that being said, where is your work taking you then these days? What do you feel really passionate about? What's coming up for you next?
I think you mentioned the hero's journey, and that's very interesting because let me connect your question with the hero's journey idea. I totally agree that the hero's journey is really in a discussion right now, because the quest idea, there is a hero, and he is becoming a person with a certain background and certain magical parents, is becoming a hero because he's overcoming a big obstacle. He has some friends, some fellows, but it's a singular person who succeeds, and he's a superstar. it's a bit the idea or the cliche people have. But in fact, Joseph Campbell always said, where you stumble lies the treasure. It's not only a journey of outside physical challenges. It's also a question of your personal challenges, of your inner growth. So for me, the overall goal is really growing, not growing by killing others or by just being a hero. Because, for example, in the Romans, when somebody won a lot of battles, he was driven through the famous gate, and people say, remember, you're just a person. Remember, you're just a person. Because the people went into a hybris. So we have dictators around the world. They create a mise en scène that they are the heroes. So it's abused. Very often the hero idea is abused by people who become powerful and say, I am the savior of my nation. But in fact, they're not saving anybody. That Hitler said, I'm saving the world. But he put the world into trouble, into destruction, because the pain he felt inside, the trauma he had, he didn't face this problem. So his inner enemy, his inner abuse, this inner weakness and hurt, he couldn't cope with it. So he had to destroy and be the savior of the world. From my point of view, in this world, we need a deeper understanding of hero's journey. It's not superficial. It's not about just being a hero and strong person. And it's about sacrificing. But as you mentioned, it's also about being a community and solving problems. For example, the global warming. How can we as a community, with the strengths of certain individuals, but working together, save this problem? But it's about creating freedom, because if we destroy the basics of our world, we have to understand that in 10 or 50 or 100 years, we have a bad air. We can't breathe anymore. So we have to understand. So from my point of view, we are really in a strong discussion around the hero's journey and the understanding and the acceptance. We're talking about anti-heroes. We're talking about different models. But from my point of view, hero's journey is about, you're born into this world, thrown into the father world. You are the son, or in Satchidananda, you have to find your bliss, and you have to make something out of your life. But the thing in your life is to really grow by finding paths to being helpful to your community, helping to your world, but also to grow deeply inside of yourself. Not only be a warrior and using weapons, but really to be a person who can deal with yourself. For me, where you stumble lies the treasure. Where I stumble, that's when I hate somebody, I hate myself too. I see myself in the other person. I see myself like in a mirror. So I have to go into my own struggle, my own demons, fight with my own dragons. It's not about, for example, the Siegfried, the Siegfried president, so the Siegfried of the Nibelung. It's a bit like Trump, he has German roots. He's the American president. He's very loud, very powerful. But it's not only about his physical actions or the physical things he teaches or he wants to have. It would also be a question, is he on his own journey? I never thought that he's on a journey into himself. It's just everybody's bad. He condemns a lot of people. He doesn't go into his own cell. He doesn't look into the mirror.
It's a good lesson on how not being able to do that turns into pathology.
Yes,
right?
Of course he's a beautiful person. He's a nice person. Could he be? But the thing is, does he cope with the physical actions and the personal actions of psychological? And he doesn't get this balance. So he's like sometimes I have the feeling like it's like a child suffering. He condemns everybody instead of really understanding. We're all people. We all want to find solutions, want to have family, want to be rich, or whatever our goal is. But in this case, for me, he's an interesting guy because self-reflection is not his greatest strength. He's powerful in setting goals and trying to fighting them through. That's the strength of him. But if he could combine this with self-reflection, he would be a wonderful person. But lacking one thing is you're not stable, not balanced. And this not being balanced or imbalance means you can create a lot of hurt as well. So the
A
hero's
lot of
journey
damage.
tells
Yeah.
the story of the outer world, the journey of the outer world, but also your journey in your inner world and your inner demons. So, and the
Right.
final result at Joseph Campbell's idea is the freedom to live, mastery of the two worlds, having your female side and your male side in yourself, the physical side in the inner side, and the you know, being balanced with all yin and yang in your life.
Right. And yet, so much of the hero's journey, the way it's interpreted and talked about today, is masculine.
Yeah.
And I think women relate to it very differently. And I think that is a missing piece, right, of the discussion. So I think there's more here to explore, right, around the hero's journey. We could talk about that for the next, every week for the next few months, and probably discover some new things. But I do like, that first of all, there seems to be more awareness about the hero's journey, and maybe some slight shifts that need to happen for today's world, right? And so more to come, right? It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds and what have you. But I think that you also have some interests in different ways or different places to apply your storytelling skills today, sort of that helps us, move into the future. So talk to me a little bit about that, what's going on in your mind there.
Yeah, that's a good question. Leon Feuchtwanger, a famous German Jewish writer, Austrian German Jewish writer, he said, on the gravestone of the world, of the earth, there could be a writing saying, I just wanted the best for myself. And I think all the people want the best for themselves. I think we try to solve problems all the time, but it's not so easy to really get them solved. I would be happy to, for me, storytelling has different levels. One level would be the frog perspective, the micro work that we're doing when we improve a script or when we improve a website or when we improve LinkedIn articles. That's on the micro world. That's what we do every day. But there's the meso world as well. That's about more about not the detailed view or perspective. It's more about the human view. How is it with emotions and value? And there's another view, that's the bird's view, the God's view. The question, for example, what is the story of the future? How do we see Europe? Europe is a beautiful place with a lot of different languages and people. Unbelievable how beautiful it is. You go to Italy, you find so many beautiful people and stories and everything. You go to Sweden, how beautiful this landscape is. So you can go everywhere. You can go to Russia, to South America, to the Native Americans. There's so many interesting people, and I think we have to collectively find stories that we can share, that we can create together, like future stories. I would love to have more sensible people. I would love to have a Merkel or the European Commission's president, that they have this physical actions and the inner actions, and that we create roundtables discussing stories, creating stories, and that we value much more the journey of every person. We have 450 million people living in Europe. How can we support them to become an identity as a region, as a nation, as Europe, as part of the world? I don't want Europe to be against China or America. No,
right.
People. Yeah. It's just one single world. And I would love to have us storytellers support and mentor. I would like to have in school, I would like to not only teach sports and physics, sports and chemistry, but also storytelling and media, but creating stories. You can tell stories that have happened yesterday, but you can also create fictional stories or create plays, or you can create ideas for the future. Storytelling for me is the thing that combines everything. And the most complex thing in the world is only the brain connected to all your arms and bodies. That's the most complex thing in the world. It's 100 billion neurons. Some neurons are connected 100,000 times with others. It's so complex. So a person would say, I understand the nuclear bomb, but I don't understand my wife. Yes, because it's much more complex than a nuclear bomb. And the most important thing is really to help master storytelling and have the respect and learn to listen and to create stories. From my point of view, even in the COVID crisis, COVID-19, you see the lack of storytelling. You see how difficult it is to grab this virus, how difficult it is to shape, to, oh my God, it's on one hand side, it's you see how many stories are told, but you see how weak we are because it's so difficult to find same words, stay together, learn, structure informations that we have from scientists. It's really difficult. We put our country and the world in a big crisis. It's not a crisis, only a virus crisis, also a mental crisis, an economic crisis. And you see what we would need would have tables to sit together and tell stories and create stories, and really with agreement and disagreement, like Randy Nelson said.
Right.
We can't only say, oh, you have my opinion, that's wonderful. No. We have to sit together with the people with the most opponent or the most opposite opinions to create the best results.
Right. And what we know about stories and storytelling is that once you hear somebody else's story, and once that person hears your story, you see and experience the commonalities, the bridges between the two. And I'm talking about thoughts and opinions. I'm talking about when you share stories of your experiences. Then, right, those walls start breaking down. Those stereotypes start breaking down. Those divisions start breaking down. And now you can have a conversation that you can build something together. But if that first step isn't present, then you end up yelling at each other from your different positions. And so I think you're right. As storytellers, I think we have a great contribution to what's going on today, and as we move into the future, to help orchestrate these kinds of conversations through our storytelling skills and our storytelling philosophy and our storytelling worldview.
I so agree. For me, I think the most important thing as storytellers, we have to have, from my point of view, a great heart, really great heart, empathy. Because the world has so many different views, we have to say, okay, tell me your opinion. First act, I accept it. I try to understand it. Let's go to the second act and then discuss, find arguments, pro and con, and find solutions. So it's always about thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. But even our starting community, oh wow, we are fighting and we have discussions. And I think, hey, my God, we need the virtue sometimes and understand it's a process understanding. Someday I believe for example, it's a bad weather, somebody else knows it's a good weather because the rain is good for the fields and for the grain and for the nature. I says, no, it's raining and it's a bad weather. So it's a question of a view and a perspective. And for example, for me, the word social distancing, oh my God, we have to take care of our words, because social distancing means I don't socialize with you anymore. I don't want to sit and talk to you.
I don't physically social. I socialize, but it's not physical. Yeah.
Exactly. If we would have said physical distancing, that is okay. But social distancing is a wrong word. So what you created is and we have to take care of our words. when I say, oh, this is an opportunity. In other words, there's a famous joke, two sales agents from England go to Africa and they want to sell shoes to Africa. And one says, oh, well, there are so many, the people in Africa don't wear shoes, so we can buy shoes. The other says, no, it's no market because they don't wear shoes. It's no opportunity. So it's
right.
It's optimism or pessimism. Okay, I have to apologize. It's a bad joke on Africa because in Africa they always had shoes earlier than we had it in Europe because these are our ancestors. We all are Africans. But I want just to mention this idea. You can say I'm an optimist or a pessimist. And in media, for example, they run into the destructive or pessimist view because they think it helps to sell. And from my point of view, no, because people want to have a great life. They want to have a great food, a great hotel. They want to have a great parent, a great partner in their love in their relationship. So from my point of view, people are looking for solutions all the time. So they're looking for solutions, but of course they want to know the news and what happens in the world, but they're not as aggressive and bad as we sometimes perceive.
Right.
So I'm really convinced from the problem-based storytelling or problem-based journalism, I believe that we have to be constructive and we have to support solutions and understanding. We have to support understanding Chinese people. We have to support understanding American people. We can be so happy that the Americans, liberated us because we had the Nazis here. So we can be so happy that they really came in and said, so we stop the ideology. But what we have to do, we have to build bridges. Stories have to build bridges, and we are the people who help to create sense, the sensement day. We can only live sense, and making sense of something, of informations or whatever. Making sense is creating a story for yourself.
Right. And that's so interesting because I've never. Now this is me, right? I'm an outlier sometimes. I think way differently than some people, but I understand this whole sense making thing. I mean, it is rampant everywhere. But in my mind, sense making is okay, important, needed. But I always think of it in terms of meaning making. And I know sense-making people talk about meaning-making, but I distinguish between the two.
Oh, right.
So, but anyway.
So how do you see it?
Well,
because I like this idea. How do you distinguish sense-making to meaning-making? It's interesting.
Well, I always think of it as from the experiential side. So sense-making is, sense, I get it, I understand it.
Ah, right.
Okay, something to do it, right?
All right, understand, yeah.
But meaning making is, now that's meaningful. Now I can do something with it. Now I know the next piece of transformation. Now I know the next place on my journey. Now and so that to me is a richer place. And what it is, it's like those in the sense-making world, they talk about meaning making, they equate the two together. And like you were just talking about, well, is that the right word? Right? Maybe not, right? Sense making.
But it's a difference between the two. Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Big difference.
But here's what we could talk, for another few hours, and I want to be respectful to our listeners I think, we're at a place where we can start, sort of wrapping up our conversation for today. Totally for today. And I so appreciate you sharing. You've shared so much with us, Uwe, about how you got started, the different points of view, how they developed, your experiences in the film. I mean, this is very different. My journey completely different, not through the filmmaking world at all, right? And yet our journeys, we stumbled across the same kind of wisdom and lessons along the way. And I will say, to just sort of frame up this whole conversation, we ended up talking about language. And in our world, you know, we talk of, or we're identified as storytellers. You know, sometimes we say the word storytelling, but I think that it is, our work is much bigger than that. And it's really about story work, right? In all of its facets and all of its richness and all of its depth. And I'm so happy to have a kindred spirit with you, right? In the journey that, you know, we have together now. And so I so appreciate all that you've shared today. It's
Thank
really
you.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I have a last word from my point of view, because it asked me a bit where I'm heading for. I would say,
Yes.
Joseph Campbell said, if you want to save the world, you have to save yourself. And by saving yourself, you save the world. I think not going too much outside, but really going, look into the mirror and try to help myself, finding my voice, find my inner peace, my own power, my equilibrium, my balance, my joy, my bliss. And I think with that, I help so much other people and other multiplicators. You know, I'm just a little piece of it. But in a system, you know, if it's not about to be altruistic, you know, always help others. I have to concentrate also about, you know, making photographs and making movies and finding me and also helping others to grow. So this is for me a beautiful saying, you know, save yourself and you will save the world. So it's very important to find a way with your own hurt and your own vulnerability, your own trauma. And so I'm still working on myself, and I'm curious every day. And it's beautiful to see that you are growing every day, that a lot of people grow, and see hungry companies who want to learn and grow. This is wonderful. People who want to grow and to learn. And I can only teach that it's both sides. Doing face-to-face, go into action, but also go on your trip to yourself. So that makes the beauty in the world. So storytelling is really about self-efficacy, you know, how to every story tells, how do you find your path, your individual place in the world, your path. And when you find your place, I find my place too, because we support each other. We have a dialogue, conversation. We learn from each other. That's a good atmosphere. And in a safe, good atmosphere, we can all grow. So we have to take care that the water that is surrounding us, you know, the world and we are living, that it always has a good taste, a good atmosphere. Then in this case, we all grow. If you start to hate and beat and be jealous or whatever, it doesn't help. So
words of wisdom. I love it.
I love
Thank you so much, Uwe.
Yeah,
It's like
it's
such
a
a
great
wonderful
pleasure.
time
Yeah,
today.
me too.